Good evening. I'd like to welcome everybody to my channel. This is 12 Gauge. First of all, I'd like to state that everything that is talked about here, discussed here, is my own opinion. Is my own educated theory, my own hypothesis, is my own thoughts, and is never intended to hurt anybody by discussing this. It's merely to discuss different angles of something that has been with me since it happened almost a year ago and some months. So, first of all, I'd like to discuss the traits of a serial killer. Okay. Hope the sound in the background doesn't irritate people. An expert revealed the 12 key traits common in serial killers, and some of them might surprise you. This is Business Insider. Smooth talking, but insecure. Looky, looky, Mr. Bundy. Ted Bundy was a charmer, the kind of guy that made it easy for people to be swept into his web. I liked him immediately, but people like Ted can fool you completely. Today in Rule, author of the best-selling Stranger Beside Me, but her experiences with Bundy, a man she considered a friend. I'd been a cop, had all the psychology, but his mask was perfect. I say that long acquaintance can help you know someone, but you can never really be sure. Scary. Look at the last part of that where she said, knowing somebody can be scary. Thinking you know somebody and then you find out that they're a serial killer. Imagine how that would play in your head when you found this out. Okay. Egocentric and grandiose. Grandiose basically means that to go over the top on just about anything and everything. Everything is a dramatic presentation. Egocentric is all about themselves. Jack the Ripper thought the world of himself and felt he would outsmart the police so much that he sent letters taunting the London officers. Dear boss, he wrote, I keep on hearing the police have caught me, but they won't fix me just yet. I have laughed when they look so clever and talk about being on the right track. That joke about leather apron gave me real fits. I am down on horrors, and I shan't quit ripping them till I get buckled. Grand work the last job was. I gave the lady no time to squeal. How can they catch me now? I love my work and want to start again. You will soon hear of me with my funny little games. I saved some of the proper red stuff in a ginger beer bottle over the last job to write with it, but it went thick like glue and I can't use it. Red ink is fit enough, I hope. Ha ha. The next job I do shall clip the lady's ears off and send to the police officers. My knife's so nice and sharp. I want to get to work right away if I get a chance. Good luck. Jack the Ripper. Lack of remorse or guilt. Look at that guy. Does that look like a remorseful guy? Sure does not. And since we're talking about serial killers, I know Brian's not a serial killer in the Idaho 4. I know that. But look at these traits that these individuals possess that he himself could possess. Had he not been caught, or the perpetrator who did this, if they're still free, do they possess these traits? Joel Rifkin was filled with self-pity when He was convicted of killing and dismembering at least 9 women. He called his conviction a tragedy. But later in prison, he got into an argument with mass murderer Colin Ferguson over whose killing spree was more important. And when Ferguson taunted him for only killing women, Rifkin said, "Yeah, but I had more victims." Lack of empathy. And this is why I wanted to bring this to your attention. Early on, I heard that Mr. Koberger was stated as saying he lacked empathy towards people. Whatever he meant by that in his paper that he wrote when he was young, really don't understand the context of that, but he did write it. Andrel Chikatilo, who feasted on bits of genitalia, both male and female, after his kills, thought nothing to taking a life, no matter how torturous it was for his victims. The whole thing, the cries, the blood, the agony, gave me relaxation and a certain pleasure, he said. Deceitful and manipulative. Look, 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 look. It's Pogo the Clown. John Wayne Gacy. John Wayne Gacy refused to take responsibility for the 28 boys buried beneath his house, even though he also once said the clowns can get away with murder. I think after 14 years under truth serum, had I committed the crime, I would have known it, said the man the neighbors all claimed to like. There's got to be something that would click in my mind. I've had photos of 21 of the victims, and I've looked at them over the years, here and there, and I've never recognized any of them. Shallow emotions. German serial killer Rudolf Flehl, convicted of killing 10 people, later took his own life in prison, compared his hobby or murder to playing cards, and later told police, "What I did is not such a great harm. With all these surplus women nowadays, anyway, I had a good time." Look how nonchalant they are. They're just like killing is not really that big of a deal. Look at that guy's face. Laughing it up. Impulsive. Tommy Lynn Sells, who claimed responsibility for dozens of murders throughout the Midwest and South, saw a woman at a convenience store and followed her home. An impulse he was unable to control. He waited until a house went dark. Then I went into this house. I go into the first bedroom. I don't know whose room it is, and I start stabbing. The victim was the woman's young son. So Mr. Koberger supposedly waited until the house went dark. He went into the house. He didn't stop at the first room he saw because that would have been Dylan's. But supposedly, according to reports from family members, the 2 on the second floor were handled first because he didn't have to go upstairs. And then he went upstairs to the 2 girls and did what he did. Poor behavior controls. You know, another thing Mr. Koberger possessed is he had poor behavior controls according to his students and his professors and the people who he was acquaintances with while at WSU. This individual says, "I wished I could stop, but I could not. I had no other thrill or happiness," said UK killer Dennis Nilsen, who killed at least 12 young men via strangulation, then bathed and dressed their bodies before disposing of them, often by burning them. So think of an individual not having much of a life, not having much of happiness, needing excitement, and the only way that they can get that filled is to kill or hunt another individual. For Albert Fish, a masochistic killer with a side of sadism that included sending a letter to the mother of one of his victims describing in detail how he cut, cooked, and ate her daughter. Even the idea of his own death was one he found particularly thrilling. "Going to the electric chair will be the supreme thrill of my life," he said. Lack of responsibility. This is Mr. Gacy again. "I see myself more as a victim rather than a perpetrator," said John Gacy, in a rare moment of admitting the murders. "I was cheated out of my childhood. I should never have been convicted of anything more serious than running a cemetery without a license. They were just a bunch of worthless little queers and punks. Early behavior problems. When I was a boy, I never had a friend in the world, said German serial killer Heinrich Pommerenke, who began raping and murdering girls as a teen. Adult antisocial behavior. Look at Mr. Greenway. Gary, did I say Greenway? I meant Ridgway. Gary Ridgway pleaded guilty to killing 48 women, mostly prostitutes, who were easy prey and were rarely reported missing, at least not immediately. I don't believe in man, God, nor devil. I hate the whole damn human race, including myself. I preyed upon the weak, the harmless, and the unsuspecting. This lesson was taught by others. Might makes right. But think about what he just said. He didn't care. He didn't believe in man, God, nor the devil. So he became one. Let's look at this next article on Fox. It says Idaho murder investigators can identify the knife without it being found, forensic experts state. Mr. Morgan, the forensic expert, he said the knife used in the Idaho student murders may have left behind evidence that investigators could use to tie it back to the killer, even if the blade is never found. We know what happened. The four Idaho students were killed in the middle of the night by supposedly graduate student Brian Koberger. An empty tan leather sheath was found next to the bodies of two of the slain students, and police say the murder weapon is a fixed blade knife. While the knife itself is still missing, forensic expert Morgan described on Dr. Phil Thursday how the weapon could still be identified and linked to the killer. It's not necessarily that we had a knife at this point, because a knife actually would leave behind more evidence. Morgan explained. There's the K bar. Fixed blade knife, meaning that the blade stays in one position. He said the full body x-ray done during the autopsy may reveal a metal chip from the knife that can be then analyzed. So during the autopsies, they took x-rays and they could see exactly what kind of knife it was if it left any metal chips. So this knife allegedly has been used repeatedly 4 times. Just think about that. The structural integrity of this thing begins to wear down. It'll chip. Sometimes points break off. I've seen this any number of times at an autopsy. If that is the case, they may very well have recovered a metal fragment from the blade of that knife within the body. He then explained how metallurgical analysis can be used to trace the knife back to a specific manufacturer, which could help investigators figure out where the knife was sold and who purchased it. Just because the sheath was found there doesn't mean that that's the knife that was carried. So you look for a specific forensic tieback relative to the chemical structure of the blade as well. That might be a potential here in this case. So just because that knife sheath was there doesn't mean that that's the knife that was in that sheath. But they're going to be able to tie back relative of the chemical structure of the blade as well. So if any of those chips in that blade were found, they're going to be able to tell it. Well, let's talk about knife targets. Okay? The mere physicality of an edged weapon encounter is dramatically different than that of a firefight. You will be up close, probably face to face with the bad guy. You will smell their breath, feel their sweat, see their face, and hear the groan when you hear the knife is twisted out of the body. Look at how close that guy is. He's in one harm to subdue him. The mere physicality of an edged weapon encounter is dramatically different than that of a firefight. You will be up close, probably face to face. Like I just said, you'll smell his breath, you'll feel his sweat, see his face, and hear the groan when a knife is twisted out of the body. Putting a blade into someone's throat, twisting it, and then tugging it out is not a pretty sight. Sorry for the graphic there. Slashing attacks, while devastating in appearance, are usually superficial in nature and are not usually life-threatening. Stabbing attacks, on the other hand, do not look good on the surface, but the internal bleeding and damage can be extensive. Keep in mind that heavy clothing may provide protection from both slashing and thrusting attacks. So, were the individuals that night wearing clothes that protected them from slashing and thrusting attacks? You have to ask yourself, were they wearing pajamas? Were they still in their party clothes? I mean, if you looked at the clothes that they were wearing while they were out at the grub truck, Kaylee and Maddie had on a little pink shirt and some jeans and some boots and a coat. Kaylee had on a sweatshirt and some jeans and some white shoes. So I don't believe that any of that clothing would have been sufficient enough to stop a stabbing. When using a thrusting attack, the blade should be twisted when withdrawing it for two reasons: to break the naturally occurring suction and make a larger wound channel. See, there's stuff like this that anybody can research and anybody can read and anybody can get the knowledge of what happens once you do these things. I'm not going to read the rest because it's pretty graphic, but you can read it if you want. Remember, the bad guy may not know he had been stabbed or cut. Most individuals who are attacked with an edged weapon say they thought they were being punched and had no idea that they were stabbed. That's terrible. That's terrible. Keep in mind that the body is a hydraulic system with 12 pints of blood, and it may take 15 to 30% blood loss, 2 or 4 pints, to affect change in the vital signs. Most of the areas will be familiar from your first aid and CPR classes, in which you learn the pressure points to stop bleeding. I don't want to go into this next part because I already did it in another video. So if you want to learn about where to stab and the things that will happen if you stab in this area, if you stab in that area, you can go to my channel and you can see my last video. So that was pretty informative, I thought. I thought it was very informative where it spoke on, how they'll be able to potentially, if not already, have done an autopsy where they could find fragments of a knife and the pieces that could have been left behind. I've never even heard of that, and I thought that was very informative. There's been a lot of speculation this week about the trial coming up and the preparation that it's going to take for the trial to be completed and things of that nature. But do you really feel that in your heart, after this long, amidst all the conspiracy, amidst all the coulda, woulda, shouldas, if you're just looking at the evidence that was given to you, do you feel that you understand who the potential perpetrator is or isn't? Because, when we get into that, there's no way he could have done this. There's no way he could have done that. Once again, if you look at my last video where I was discussing how quickly somebody can be incapacitated, it says between 5 and 15 seconds. And they won't even be able to fight back. Cut him right here, cut him right here, cut him right here. It enabled them incapable to fight back. Today I heard the possibility of the two roommates being involved once again, the surviving roommates. Could either one of them been strong enough to overcome a 6'4" guy, a fiery brunette, a tenacious blonde, and a very outspoken, fiery friend of hers? If so, then that might be your theory. But if you're looking at logic, you have to ask yourself, how could that happen? How trained killers are taught over months and years how to incapacitate somebody. And still, at the moment of truth, you have to clear your mind where it's just you, the opportunity, and your rewards. Because if it isn't that way and it's emotional, like most people, when they talk about this, their emotions are involved. And I understand that. I understand why they're involved. I understand why they have such a emotional connection to this. But you have to ask yourself this. If you take all the emotions away and you take out that you didn't know who Brian Koberger was, is, and they just gave you the information, they didn't give you a name, would you still believe it was him? Take out the white Elantra BS. The first situation about, you know, 2013, then went to 2015, 16, take out all that, all the confusion, the pieces that you don't know about, which is the gag order. Use your intellectual mind rather than your emotional attachment. And then ask yourself, is it viable that this happens? Is it viable that an individual set up revenge to be able to go take down these four people? Or did he only intend on one and got overzealous and went and did as many as he could? Was it revenge? Was it greed? Was it money? Because most people say it was a crime of passion. A crime of passion where somebody's feelings were hurt. Supposedly, the guy that did it is 28 years old and a graduate student, and looks like his emotional attachment to life is very limited, if at all. He had that look like he doesn't attach to anything very much, especially being rejected by a female. He looked like he would just shrug it off and be like, you know what, no big deal. So look at that avenue. Does he look like somebody that would be jealous of two females that were living the party life that he wished that he could have lived? Does he really look like an individual that cared about the party life? To me, he doesn't. He looks like a very stoic, very proper, able to disguise himself for the moment. But people have more than one side to them. And I'm sure we really don't know who Mr. Koberger is. Just like we really don't know who the murdered four students were. Of course, we want to think all of them were angels and they didn't do anything wrong and they were sweet and everything like that. I hope people talk about me when I'm gone like that. But the real people will remember all the hurt and pain that I caused them. And I, in no way, am saying that they were hurtful and harmful people, okay? I'm not saying that at all. So don't get on your high horse and think, well, 12 gauge is saying that those people were just, hurtful and they hurt people and they deserve what they got. No, that's not what I'm saying. But you really don't know these people. I don't know them. So we can only assume by the pictures, by the friends talking, by this, that, and the other, who they were. So in reality, we don't know the victim, we don't know the perpetrator, we don't know the house, because in reality, nobody was there filming this reality show. We all want a piece of it. Heck, I'm spending 30 minutes tonight doing it because it's intriguing. It keeps your mind going. It's like a puzzle that nobody can solve and won't be able to. Even if they solve it, they still won't be believed that they solved it until the jury addresses whether this is the man and if he's guilty of the four. So don't stress yourself out over this, because the emotional attachment, if you have that, you need to look at what reenactment in your life is being triggered by this attachment to this case. Did you have somebody in your family murdered and then never caught them, left you with unanswered questions? Did you have domestic issues? Did you have drug issues? Did you have crime issues? Were you a criminal? Were you this, that, and the other? So therefore you can understand it, or you can state that you feel this and that and the other. Because in the end, we all do not know. I was wild at that age too. That doesn't mean I could understand what a 19, 20, 21-year-old does today, because the time isn't the same. A lot of people say, well, did you even go to college? To some of these people, and of course they did, but it wasn't the same. The drugs weren't the same, the parties weren't the same, the hazing, all that was not the same. So to sit there and say that you understand it because you once went to college and you may have been a frat and this and that and the other, unless it was last year, you really don't get it. Because things change really quickly. So I want to leave you with this, okay? Because I got to make some phone calls. It's funny how people don't mess with you until you're doing something like this. I want to leave you with this. Try to imagine, instead of looking at this as a crime that needs to be solved, look at it as a situation where it really makes logical sense, with logical thought. Because in reality, all these Linda Lane footage, all the Taylor Avenue footage, all the Banfield footage, I ask you to stop making that like somebody was filming a movie at each of these locations, and the only thing that was being shown was evidence of a crime committed. Because a lot of that was just Saturday night in a college town. A lot of that was just kids, being loud, rowdy, dressing up, scaring people, whatever it was. But since we don't know the answer, we're going to put these players in a situation where they were in the limelight at the wrong time, at the wrong time, at the wrong time, at the wrong time. The grub truck. I've seen so many videos where they've dissected every person at the grub truck. They've talked about this person. They've talked about that person. They've dug into their family. They've dug into their family. You know what? I would have hated to be at that grub truck that night, because God knows what people would have dug up on me, my family. And it's out there forever. But in the name of justice, people do this every day, not realizing the implication that they're putting people's lives in. And the First Amendment It's free speech. That's the beauty of what we do on these platforms. Have free speech. But after a while, free speech is no longer free. When we start harming people with our words, putting them in a light that they can't escape from, even if it's true, we have no right to put people in places where we really don't know they belong. And we're not investigators. I'm not. I'm not a cop. I'm not a judge. I'm not a jury. I'm not any of that. But I am smart enough to put my mind to work on certain things that could be this or that. I haven't discussed a lot of my theories, but I have them, and I'll give them eventually, just not tonight. I hope you guys take care of each other. This is an awful world we live in, and the beauty that we see is the one that we see in the mirror every day. I hope you take care of that. Till next time, I'm out.